Hey, this is Jenna, and I'm back with a movie review of The Phantom of the Opera, the 1925 silent version, directed by Rupert Julian, starring Lon Chaney, Mary Philbin, and Norman Carey. I think Carey is his last name anyway. So I went to Starbucks today and I saw that The Phantom of the Opera, the 1925 silent film version, was on Amazon Prime. So I decided to watch it for free. I have seen this movie before. I watched it a long time ago when I was like 12 or 13 years old, when I was like super obsessed with Phantom of the Opera. And I really enjoyed it. It was really fun to watch it in Starbucks. I just had like my headphones plugged in and I just sat and chilled and sipped my coffee and enjoyed the show. So I have things that I really like about the 1925 silent film version and then things that I have major beef with. So I'm going to get into that in this review. But first, I'll kind of go over the plot. The plot is very similar to the novel by Gaston Leroux, and that was published in 1911. It's about a man named Eric who is the Phantom of the Opera. He is obsessively in love with a woman named Christine Daae, and he teaches her to sing so that she can become famous and perform on stage as an opera singer. But his love for her is unrequited as she is in love with a man named Raoul, and he will basically stop at nothing to get her love. So basically, the 1925 silent film version follows the book very closely, except for a few crucial details that I felt really changed the feel of the story. This movie has a lot of appeal just because it has this classic monster movie feel to it. But the problems that I had with it, I had problems with the music, which played pretty consistently throughout the entire movie. And I actually remember the music being different the first time I watched it back when I was 13 than the music was here on the Amazon Prime version. I found it really distracting, and oftentimes it really didn't match the mood or the feeling of of the scene and what was going on. Like oftentimes there would be something really suspenseful going on the scene going on screen, but the music was like really upbeat and kind of lighthearted. So it just didn't really make sense. And the scenes that were suspenseful and could have been suspenseful were they didn't like really reach their full potential because the music just really got in the way. And the second thing that really bothered me about the movie was the characterizations of the Phantom and Christine. What makes the Phantom of the Opera so great in the original novel and then also in the Andrew Lloyd Webber version is that the Phantom is a very compassionate figure. He's a bad man in many ways, and yes, he's a psychopath, but at the same time, you can't help but feel so much compassion and sympathy for him, and you kind of root for him, even though he is a bad guy. So that was completely lacking from the silent film version. The Phantom in who's played by Lon Chaney, even though he strikes like this very legendary classic figure, he doesn't like really inspire any compassion in the viewer. Towards the end of the movie, he ends up escaping with Christine in a carriage as this mob is chasing him, and the carriage ends up overturning after Christine had jumped from it. And he decides instead of going for Christine that he's going to make a run for it and save his own life. And the mob ends up catching up with him, and in the end, they end up killing him and throwing him into the water. So this is very different from the original novel. In the book, the Phantom decides to after Christine chooses to be with Eric to spare Raoul's life, Christine allows the Phantom to kiss her forehead, and he is so moved by this act of acceptance that he decides to let Christine go to be with Raoul so that she can marry him and be happy. And he is redeemed. His love for Christine redeems him in the end, and makes him a better person. And in the end chapters of the novel, he goes to the Persian, which is a character in the novel, and who is a close friend of the Phantom's, who he has a long history with. And the Phantom relays the story, and he cries and tells the Persian that he's dying of love. And in the end, the Phantom does end up dying out of a broken heart, because with losing Christine, he just decides to give up on life, and that's the end of his story, which is completely different from what happens in the silent film version, where the Phantom is just portrayed as being very selfish, and he's just out to protect himself in the end, and ultimately chooses protecting himself over having Christine. So the other characterization that really bothered me was Christine, because in the book she is a very compassionate person, and even though some people may find her to be a frustrating character, she she has compassion for the Phantom, and initially she's horrified by him, but once she comes to know him, she sees him as a sympathetic figure and actually feels like she has this responsibility towards him and really doesn't want to hurt him. Whereas in the silent film version, the Christine, who's played by Mary Philbin, she just downright thinks the Phantom is a monster and he's hideous and ugly, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with him, and she just runs to Raoul for Raoul to save her from the hideous, dastardly Phantom. So, and she faints a lot. Like, she's one of those classic female characters that faints at like every little thing that happens. So that was kind of funny. But yeah, I really was disappointed that Christine didn't have a more compassionate nature and that the Phantom wasn't more sympathetic, because those are things that make up the Phantom of the Opera and make it what it is. And that's the reason why people are so drawn to the story. So the silent film version, despite these things, is actually a very popular version of the Phantom of the Opera among Phantom fans, and it's considered to be a classic monster movie, similar to like Creature of the Black Lagoon or The Mummy or Dracula. So it is really iconic in that way. I did really enjoy seeing a reimagining of the Phantom of the Opera that was so similar to the original novel, and the Masquerade Ball, and especially was very beautiful because it's the only scene that's in color. And I also loved the scene where the Phantom follows Raoul and Christine up to the roof, and where he's on the statue of Apollo and his like cloak is billowing in the night sky as he's watching them, and he feels so betrayed by Christine. So there were a lot of really great scenes. And the unmasking, that first unmasking scene especially, is so powerful. And Lon Chaney's makeup is really great. So there are a lot of things to like about this movie, but as I've said, there it's not my favorite Phantom of the Opera version out there, because Christine's not very compassionate and the Phantom isn't very sympathetic. So that is my review of the 1925 version of the Phantom of the Opera. I really hope that you enjoyed my review, and if you have requests for movies that you'd like me to review, feel free to comment down in the comment section, and I'll get to those. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!